we are all pretty remarkable. And every day in a city, you're walking past all these people and you don't see their magic because it would just be overwhelming. But when you're in nature and there's more space and you have the trees, and if you're lucky, every so often you run into a non-human consciousness, you'll get that feeling that this is intelligent. And I don't feel that different from it. Hey folks, welcome to episode 25 of If I Rule the World, the system change podcast that's all about making the world a better place. And of course, there are loads of different ways, different ideas of how we could make the world a better place, which is why I'm speaking to as many people as possible, the experts, the change makers, the disruptors, the folks I'm calling the students and masters and practitioners of system change, and I'm asking them a question. If you rule the world, what would you do? I've been struggling this past month to keep up with replying to all your lovely comments on Instagram, but especially via email. I just want you to know, please know, I read every single one of them, and I'm making it my business to reply to every single one of them, especially the emails. So some really thoughtful, really deeply personal emails, which I'd love to share. So if you do email in, just let us know. Are you happy for me to share them with this growing, beautiful community of listeners? So you might detect a little bounce in my voice. I'm in a good mood, guys, which frankly is a miracle given the state of the world. But yes, I am in a good mood, and I've kind of came up with a little mantra recently to keep me pushing forward with the work that I do, which is my small, tiny contribution to trying to make the world a better place. And my mantra goes like this: I continue to practice joy and gratitude while never forgetting there is a genocide happening in Gaza, which continues with US and UK and EU government complicity. This is the official stance of so many of our most respected, our most revered aid agencies and charities and NGOs, from Oxfam to Amnesty International. So I find it really chilling that it still feels contentious and controversial to speak out. There's something really just Orwellian about this all. I've heard it described by psychologists who study Orwellian theory as this is what I think we're living through, living in a hypnotic state of cognitive dissonance that compels us to disregard our own experience, our own perception, in place of an official narrative. Nevertheless, guys, I'm in a good mood because maybe it's my algorithm that's serving me up more of what I believe, probably. But what I'm seeing are more and more commentators, so artists and activists and, like even school football coaches, just people who are expressing in many and varied ways that this present system cannot be counted on to reconfigure this world order, for want of a better expression. And what do I mean by that? Like reverse growing inequality, and maybe just to put it really succinctly, to usher in an era where we value all life. And one of those people, you won't be surprised to learn, is today's guest, a system change practitioner who I think has a formula to build resilience in the face of waking up to all that is not right in the world. He shares his message as a filmmaker, as a Tai Chi teacher, and a communicator in Daoist philosophy. His name is George Thompson, and his work spans this incredible gap between personal transformation and planetary transformation. And he does this together with his online community of over 250,000 subscribers. So George has what I think is an absolutely brilliant coming-of-age story. So he's still a young man, but when he was a younger man, he set out in search of meaning and manliness, and he struck out on a journey to the East, looking for a kung fu master. And he wound up as if the butt of some cosmic joke, as he puts it. He wound up in the Wudang Mountains of China in a Daoist monastery, principally because he didn't know the difference. And I feel this cosmic joke just continues because I accidentally discovered while speaking to him on this podcast that aside from being all these things, so the filmmaker, the Tai Chi teacher, the communicator in Daoist philosophy, George is also a closet economist, or at least that's what he studied at university, which makes this beautiful conversation you're about to hear, this beautiful conversation about the miracle and the mystery of life, it makes it grounded in some really clear, actionable thinking about system change.
Well, first of all, Gillian, I think you're an amazing human, and I've been grateful for the times that we've connected. And for those that don't know who I am, I'm George, and I am a filmmaker and a communicator of Taoism. You may have heard of the ancient Chinese philosophy, and I have had the privilege of living in China, studying on this incredible mountain in the Wudang Mountains for a total now of 2 years over the last 8 years. And I'm really passionate about what I have learned, and it's been so healing for my life. And if I ruled the world, I think that the world could benefit from some of these ancient practices and ideas. So what stimulated this journey for me is, just anxiety and confusion and not really knowing what I was doing with my life, and not really ever having had the training to be able to relate to myself. So I did maybe 30 years ago, young people wanted to be a fireman or a spy or a doctor. And then I think the most wanted profession of the youth today is to be a YouTuber. And I was one of those people that wanted to create a YouTube channel and to create, but even in my younger self, I wanted it to be mission driven. So I was passionate about climate, and I'd run some businesses selling chocolate bars in the playground, and then made my own DJ company, and then made my own video making company. And I wanted to combine the two, a social enterprise that was doing good for the world, but I didn't know what it was. So I just graduated, entered into the big bad real world, and then made a YouTube channel, which was going to be following my journey from going from some clueless graduate to hopefully doing something that contributed to the world. I started making videos that I thought were good, and yet nobody was watching them, nobody was liking them. And so I equated my value as a human being with the number of likes I got. And because I wasn't getting any likes, it meant I wasn't likable. And so then I descended into anxiety, and this new character began to dominate my headspace, who I personified as the underminer, a little evil wizard who would say, "Yeah, George, nobody's watching your videos. You're clearly not good enough. Oh, no friends. Oh, still single. You're flawed goods. Oh, and now you're anxious. Look at everything you've been given. You're pathetic."
Wow, he's got a voice.
The evil wizard has been he's some powerful energy. And I wouldn't call him evil anymore. I would call him a wizard that wants to have some basic needs met, but has his strategies that are maybe not that helpful and quite destructive. So I was like, I really have only been by myself for a couple of months, and I've been in the biggest mental health crisis of my life so far. So I knew something needed to change. And then literally I read my diary, and at uni I'd watched some monks doing some backflips in China, some monks chopping some wood with their hands and doing high kicks. And I was like, hey, I'm judging myself as weak. Maybe I can be a stronger man, whatever that means. So I literally, went on a journey to China. But I guess if the question is, why did that excite me? Is, I think the possibility that I can take my power, I can take responsibility, I can change, I can grow, I can become stronger. And these practices that have lasted for thousands of years, that the fact that they were still going said to me, there's something in this. And so I really knew nothing about it. I hadn't done any martial arts growing up, and I had hardly even had watched any Kung Fu movies. And yet there was some part in that innocent younger George that was like, I'm going to go out and see what I can learn.
Oh, wow. I mean, first of all, I just want to say one thing. I know it's not necessarily the thing you focus on. Maybe it is because you're out spreading the message of Taoism, but you're a bloody good filmmaker. I love your scripts. I love the way you write your scripts. You manage to communicate some really complex, big, profound, almost like as big as the universe concepts in really simple, clean language and precise. And, it's like when you're in the presence of someone who's really speaking and communicating well, it seems effortless and you think you're going to easily remember everything they say. And then you kind of almost like leave that aura and then you're like, I can't remember it. So when I was going through your content and I was like, what bits do I want to try and pull in? I was watching, the couple of films, the long form films that you've done. And I was like, I want him to say that bit and then that bit. And I want him just to say that bit again exactly. And then I thought, I might as well just tell everyone to go and watch your film because I was going to do a better job. But I did feel like this is one thing that maybe hasn't been, or maybe I've just missed, but one thing that hasn't necessarily been unpacked a lot. And I feel like it feels very relevant. This like a young man coming of age story, a tale as old as time. And whether this world we live in, particularly in the West, does it serve, well, maybe it's not even a gender thing, does it serve any of us, but particularly for you. And I was hearing things that I'm hearing so much about, like toxic masculinity, and the reason why some figures like, say, Andrew Tate has such appeal, because young men and boys are not being, I don't actually know what is not happening, because I very much identify as a cis female. It's a mystery to me. I have a son who is about to turn 18, so maybe that's why I'm also tuning into this. But I felt like it was something that's really important for us to kind of unpack. I don't know whether you feel that when you see a lot of that going on in the world right now, or in our society, do you feel you have an answer to that, or do you feel Taoism does?
Yeah, I think it's such an important question. And first of all, for those, like Taoism, what is Taoism? For those that don't know. So there's the Tao of Taoism, and it literally translates as the way, the path. So it can refer to as something as the way of the universe, the way of the cosmos, the Tao of nature. So the big kind of metaphysical questions about who we are. Is there a God? Where do we come from? I'm born. There's billions of us. I have my own thoughts and feelings. Where do I go after death? We're involved in this great mystery called life in the universe. And every culture around the world has come up with different stories. So that big Tao, that big understanding for me is that sense of spirituality and sense of understanding who I am. The word Tao means the way or the path, literally. So also it can be something as small as the way of knitting, the way of chopsticks, the way of George, the way of Gillian, the way of our beautiful viewers and listeners. And so then really understanding our own Tao is about understanding our own path through life. And, we are truly unique. So we all come from this great mysterious source, no matter our gender, our sex, our religion, even our species. We are all manifestations of the mysterious intelligence of the universe. And we're all unique, truly unique. And we're not special for being unique, unless we're all special. A video I love online is somebody talking about snowflakes, like the classic, no two snowflakes are the same. And this scientist was asked, so what do you think about these snowflakes? It's like, well, it's ridiculous because nothing in nature is the same. No two leaves are the same. No two pieces of bark are the same. Any complex system coming together suddenly and will inevitably always create uniqueness. And then here you and I are, 36 trillion cells in this magical self-organizing system that we call a human being. And wow, we have so much uniqueness to understand and to tap into. The things that resonate for you will be different to the things that resonate with me. This is what the yin yang shows as differentiation within unity. So we've got this kind of unity of the big Tao, but there's also so much uniqueness and differentiation in our own lives and every single human being. So then if we bring that to gender, it's like sex is a fundamental aspect of life, no sex between male and female, there's no life. And then we have gender, which is the kind of the constructs that we put onto it. And we talk about man and woman, and which is the kind of concepts that we put onto the biological sex. So yeah, I too identify with the kind of the way that I present. I'm a cis man, and I identify as a man. And I think like my take on it, and obviously this is such a complex world, and it's so just so much division has been created around identity, and I have a yearning for us to be able to just slow down and just to find some common ground with it. I mean, for my take on it is we are unique, and yet these ideas of man and woman, male and female, they're not just totally made up concepts. There are archetypes and there are certain characteristics that on average a man or who has a male body is more likely to present than a female or a woman. And there's huge differentiation, huge diversity within that. And the beautiful transgender movement of people allowing themselves to express themselves is amazing. If you feel you don't fit into these binary categories of man and woman, then more power to you, in my view. I think there's been a reaction, however, against kind of that movement saying, well, man and woman is made up. It comes from a patriarchal domination system. And I think then people like Andrew Tate become really popular because as a man, I don't really have role models to help me understand like what a healthy, wise, inspiring man looks like. Because so many of the role models that we have as men is unfortunately violent, like generals and leaders from history, or our fathers, which sending love to all the fathers in the world. We live in a world of trauma where unfortunately more toxic aspects to masculinity have been passed down the generations. Yeah, I feel like Andrew Tate then fills that gap where men are looking for role models, but unfortunately these really toxic, violent men who treat women without respect then dominate. Like, I don't really talk about gender that much in my work. I speak to the human, I speak to nature, and that's important to me, not just to speak to one gender only. But as a man, I certainly didn't have those role models that I think I craved, and I, in my own life, want to show up in the world in the best way that I can as a man who is grounded in himself as much as I can be, and grounded in love and compassion, and actually advocating that love and compassion isn't weakness, it is strength. And like violence is just almost an easy way out of actually facing the challenges of being a human being. And actually it takes more skill, more courage to stay with our emotional landscape and to express ourselves with skill. And those are skills that I seek to develop in my own life.
That's beautiful. I mean, I asked the question because what I see, like when in your films and in other films, the few times that I have seen the kind of physical practice of what you do at the monastery in Wudang, it looks like there is, well, first of all, it's a very physical practice, isn't it? Flexibility, strength, agility, balance, coordination. It pulls all of those things together. So it's almost a martial art, or is it a martial art?
It comes from the martial art culture. Yeah, for sure. It's a moving meditation grounded in the martial art culture.
Yeah. So I just wondered, like, how much of that being able to channel, and I guess this isn't just exclusive to men, but, that channel those kind of emotions that can become destructive into sort of a disciplined martial art form, like what that's given you, I guess.
I like to explore the ideas of divine masculine and divine feminine, and maybe that will trigger some woo-woo alarms for people. I have a strong woo-woo alarm.
Well, you're in good company here, don't worry.
And, it's these archetypes of like what is... So like an important note is that divine masculine, divine feminine can be gender and sex independent. These are kind of energies. So divine feminine traditionally is seen as flow and love and movement and dynamism. It's like actually what makes life worthwhile. And the divine masculine is consciousness itself, is presence and clarity and the ability to hold all of that movement that the divine feminine brings in. So to apply that to our own lives, it's like, okay, whether we're men and women, male or female or other, we have emotions, right? We have hearts and we have sensations that can be challenging, anxiety and shame and grief and anger, as well as joy and hope and happiness. And that is the divine feminine moving through us, moving through our being. And then the divine masculine is the ability to hold that experience in presence, as opposed to getting lost in the storms of that emotional ocean. The divine masculine is that ability to watch that experience with presence, groundedness, clarity. So no matter our body, no matter where we are in our lives, no matter our age, no matter our gender, we can develop the ability to expand our window of tolerance, to become more and more grounded in our everyday experience. And this potential is what all of the great teachers of history all spoke to, is that our human hearts have the potential, we are born with it, to hold all experience. And this ability for us to have spaciousness and presence in the midst of all the chaos and the carnage. Enlightenment is not about not having pain. It's not about like not having shame or grief, but instead the ability to experience all of that with a balanced mind, with spaciousness. So my philosophy of change is insight, practice, community. Insight, practice, community. So these insight moments, like you spoke, like you go to a teacher, you go on a course, or you listen to a podcast, or you read a book, and you have these wow moments of insight. And then they go, because that's just the natural waves of life. Practice is this crucial second dimension, which keeps those insights alive. And then community is ultimately what can keep us on the path and then ultimately change the systems that are destroying our planet and can also then help life flourish. So the second component of practice is so important. And so, all of our viewers and listeners will have their own practices that can support them. And what I have learned on my journey is, the beautiful world of Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation, and also then dance as well. And these movements coming from the martial art culture, just to give you one thing that it gives us, is it brings us down, it brings our awareness down to just below our belly button, to our core, or the Chinese call our dantian, which is the lower chakra or the lower energy center. And we don't have to get too esoteric with it. But so many of our challenges are in our heads, where we're ruminating and constantly lost in hubbub and talk. If we can train our heart and mind to come down into our body, into our physical center, then suddenly we open up into more spaciousness, more groundedness. And the good news is that that is a practice and can come with time.
If you think of this as like system change, right, which is what this podcast is ostensibly about, how do you frame this in a system change idea? Like, is this about different cultures? Are you leaning into another culture to bring back, almost like an envoy, bringing back news from distant lands of how we might be able to operate in a way that's a more balance, more harmony? How does that sit in your mind?
Yeah, I think system change is so important. And what I am really passionate about is the intersection between personal transformation and planetary transformation. So you've got the kind of the personal transformation, how self-help people is like, meditate and find peace, or you create your own reality. So manifest abundance through changing your mindset. And there's obviously challenges to that, because, you go to a Sudanese farmer who has been facing climate drought for the last 6 years. And, you say, okay, just get really clear on what sort of loaf of bread would he like? And like, how would he feel if you had that loaf of bread? Bring that into your reality, manifest it. It's just like deeply immoral when you put it like that. And yet in the kind of self-help world, that is quite a dominant narrative that we hear and is dominant on social media. Then you have the environmentalists who, are rightly saying that the way that we're living is unsustainable and we need to change, but they also don't offer ideas to help us stay resilient through it. And ultimately, it is the energy. If, like, my idea of like the process of transformation is insight, practice, community, is that we've got to understand who we are, and really, with that understanding of who we really are and what we are a part of, that changes our energy, how we show up in the world, how we want to relate to one another and our societies. But then practice is what's going to keep us resilient, because if we're not resilient, then we can't show up in community to then be part of the system change. Because we live in interconnected systems, there is no separation between individual transformation and planetary transformation. And so then it's what can we do as individuals and how can we contribute to system change? For me, in some ways, I am an envoy from the East, and to say, hey, look, we have this wisdom in our own lands, and there are still wisdom holders that can keep it alive to a certain amount. But in the East, they had this idea of the Tao and this interconnection without there being kind of an authoritative king up in the sky, e.g. God, man with a beard, and then we lowly humans down here, and the earth is for us to do what we want with. Some of the dominant stories that we've had in our societies. So there's some deep wisdom that's important for our society to come and to be heard. And so I am that kind of communication between China, one way of understanding our relationship with the world, and then the West. I'm a Western man. But then I like to say I'm exploring Tao without the ism. So Taoism, this beautiful gift from China, Tao, the way of nature. And so then it's not just about some wisdom from far away, it's about science and about your own intuition and about Christianity, about your community, and all of them feeding into understanding ourselves, our potential, and coming together to create system change, to create the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. So yeah, that for me, the intersection, there's no separation in system change. All of it matters.
So there's the lack of separation, but in I guess the human systems and natural systems, which is such a prevalent way of thinking in the West. I find that really fascinating because it's a beautiful quote, and I'm just going to just kind of read it back to you because it's probably, I don't know if you'll remember this, but it's in your film Journey to the East, about towards the end, and you're stood surrounded by nature in a forest, I believe in China, and there's a stream, and you're just sort of very pensive. You're looking at the stream, and then you just turn to camera, and you then say, every single one of us is this crazy miracle of nature. Do you remember this?
Yes.
And I remember when I heard this, I was like, mind blown moment. But you were like, all of our brains are the most complicated thing that humans have ever found. And every day in a city, we're walking past these people, and yet we don't see their magic. And you go on to say that every now and again, when you're in a natural space in nature, you bump into non-human intelligence and you don't feel that different. So I just wondered how connection with nature fits into this practice, fits into this way of seeing the world.
Yeah, thank you for naming that. And I think it's just all of our viewers and listeners and yourself, I know, have these experiences of connection with nature. Like you go in for a walk, or you see the squirrels and you see all the birds and their magnificent colorful chests and wings, and you just marvel at like, wow, the abundant creativity that we are a part of. All of these species on this planet, all these species that are also having an emotion and they're experiencing things, and care for family, desire for play, chirping in the morning more than they need to be just because they enjoy it. The kind of the scientific materialist worldview that everything's random, everything is just mechanical, bumping of particles, and just randomly over billions of years life emerged, and your intelligence, real intelligence, is only thinking and rationality. And so that means intelligence just emerges out of an otherwise non-intelligent universe. And so then all of the awe and wonder is taken out. And like remembering that awe and wonder we have intuitively when we have those wow experiences when we're just in nature. And since that film, repeatedly all the time, if I'm in nature, I have those just wow moments. And so they're really accessible. That's the thing. It's super accessible. So in fact, it is part of our biological and emotional conditioning, and what we are born with is to, when we come into connection with the mystery, then we have that wow, that awe and wonder. And an amazing person I recommend to check out is Dacher Keltner, who is the awe and wonder person, and it wrote an amazing book called Awe, and talks about how monkeys, chimpanzees, have been observed going to a waterfall and hooting and dancing and gyrating, just seeing this huge waterfall, acting in ways that they weren't observed to act just 10, 100 meters away. And so that making the same noises as well. Ooh, ah, wow. So and then ooh, wow, ah is cross-cultural as well. So that awe and wonder sounds predates language. And so this idea that comes from the scientific materialist, like life is really serious, it's all random, and we just are fluke pieces of intelligence in an otherwise dumb universe. Well, those words that you use to communicate that, the universe wasn't made with words. They came out very, very late in the process of evolution and the process of life unfolding. And so it is almost the cosmic joke. And this is the spiritual insight that the great spiritual teachers around the world came to, is like, we're already it. We're an aspect of the whole. We come from it. We are connected to it. We always are. And no matter our headspace, the criticisms that we have about ourselves, and even our species, we all come from this great mysterious source. And so then to allow ourselves to feel that awe and wonder and to actually resource ourselves in it. Just one thought is, my definition of spirituality is an understanding of that which I am a part of, and the extent to which I use that understanding as a resource to support me. So there's understanding and resource. So that is why, spiritualities have emerged all around the world, because, we have this yearning to feel a support and a connection to something bigger than ourselves.
What would you think? Like, how different would the world be if, can you picture that? Like, if everyone embraced this way of thinking, what would it look like?
Charles Eisenstein is a thinker that really has inspired me, and I recommend his books. The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. An incredible book. And one of his key phrases is that the story creates the system and we create the story. For me, I really do believe that these stories, and spirituality, if that's a word that works for you, about who we are, where we come from, what we are a part of, are really, really foundational to the whole healing of not only ourselves, but the planet. Because, we sort climate change, we put geoengineering, we pollute the skies, turning it purple, reflecting light outside, we bring the temperatures down, and we think we've solved one problem, or we do actually stop emitting carbon dioxide thinking that we've solved the problem. We've fixed climate change. But then, we're still exponentially growing on a finite planet. And the only people that think that are possible is, as you'll know, crazy people or economists. I broke the punchline too early. So the idea that we can just continue infinitely growing on a planet that has a set number of trees and fields and places that we can move into and to be as human beings, while also honoring the biodiversity that supports us, it's madness. And so the only way that we could justify this extractive, destructive, suicidal system that currently dominates our world is if we are deeply separated from nature and one another. Because that's the only way we could justify it. We extract nature because it's a resource that we can use. It's not me. If I think that I am nature, an aspect of the whole, I know that extraction and destruction of nature is destroying myself. And because I have a sense of reverence and maybe an idea of the sacredness of life and the planet, then that transforms the feeling that I have to the planet and to other human beings as well. I'm not naive that would be easy to transform the world and to bring that into everyone's consciousness. We have great potential, and this is what the wisdom teachers teach us, is hold on to the potential. I think that's the most important thing. And we also have a lot of destructive aspects. But if we let go of the potential, that this is possible, that balance is possible, then we lose hope, and then we lose our way. And so the definition of hope that really supports me is that hope is not a state of the world, but a state of mind, where we work towards something that's valuable in itself, not just because it's likely to happen. And so that energy of hope is like, I do really believe that these stories are going to change the world. And I'm not attached to that outcome of like getting everyone to sing Kumbaya around the fire. It's like we've got to put work into it, and it will take work. But that potential and holding on to that potential is so important.
So I'm just going to backtrack a bit, because infinite growth is quite different from let's just tone it down a bit, let's slow down, but keep things kind of as they are. I often think, like, if we could just go back to what life was like in the early 90s, and actually there is some data to support this in terms of if we're just on the metric of carbon emissions. But if we went back to the same sort of consumption rates of the early 90s, or better still, mid 80s. So we're still embracing industrialization and all the comfort and convenience that comes with, but we're not completely off the charts with consumption. To your mind, would that be an acceptable compromise? Or do you think like complete system overhaul is required? Like, where are you with, if you had that power, and we're going to get to the if I rule the world questions, but, if you had that all-seeing, all-knowing, all-powerful kind of, being able to affect the outcome of all of this planet, which would you do? Would you be like, dial it down a bit, or complete system change?
Yeah, we can maybe talk about the challenges of that omnipotent power, and actually whether that would be
I'm sure that's I'm sure you're glitching about that, because everyone does on this podcast. Like, who are these people? I would 100% be a dictator if I thought I had the answers. But anyway,
Well, I also just want to ground myself in knowing that I don't have the answers, and I think that this is when I've definitely will share my thoughts, and I also want to kind of empower our viewers and listeners that this is a collective journey, and it's not going to take any one answer. And I'd say that I think my main contributions is films to help understand our connection, practices to help us stay on the path, and communities to help us stay connected. That's going to be just one really ultimately small aspect of the transformation that we're needed. And every single one of you has gifts to contribute to this movement. And it's like the mycelium network of if all of us have this energy of service, contribution to a more beautiful world, I really do trust that would transform so much. And so then to get away from this hero worship of like, somebody's going to save us, and instead to actually take power in ourselves. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, the next Buddha will not be a person, but be a Sangha. Sangha is the word for community. Or the second coming of Christ will not be a person, but instead of Christ consciousness. This idea that heaven on earth is this potentiality of a human mode of consciousness that is available to us if we come together. So I want to kind of just ground in that, and to kind of empower all of us that we can make a difference, and in a world of interconnection and systems, that no action is unnoticed. Okay, it may not be able to be measured, the impact that we have as one human out of billions, but in an interconnected system, just because it can't be measured doesn't mean it doesn't matter. So to ground ourselves in that we do matter, and we are part of the whole, and so then to contribute. Then in terms of, what could the economic system look like? And I think Degrowth Will Save the World by Jason Hickel is a book that I really love. The challenges that we have with growth is that, we are decarbonizing the electricity system, which is great, but we're already creating runaway climate breakdown. So if we're trying to decarbonize the economy and economically grow, then triply hard. And then if we've got billions of people in poverty due to a lack of distribution of the abundance that is available to us, then if we in rich countries, me in England, are going to keep growing, while also then trying to live sustainably, it's just not going to work. The Daoists, it's funny that there's always been the people that say, let's go back. So even 2,500 years ago in China, where the Daoists are like, guys, we've overdone it. It's like we're surrounded by hypocrites and people claiming to be, righteous and to do good in the world, but actually all of this trying to do good, we're corrupting ourselves. Let's just go back to living in connection with nature. There's no deception before all of these words and religions and stories about who we should be.
So were they saying that 2,000 years ago?
2.5.
2.5? Oh my God. This is not our first rodeo, as they say. Oh my gosh.
So, so for me, the civilization pigeon has left the pigeon nest. I've forgotten the phrase I was going to try and say. So, I feel, I'm really grateful for the internet. I'm really grateful for my phone. I put blockers on it so I don't spend too much time on it. I'm really grateful that I can WhatsApp my nan in Liverpool. There's so much, and like, I eat generally vegan plus cheesecake if I'm emotionally vulnerable. But I'm really grateful for avocados from Mexico, and I try and get organic ones. And, just like the technology is an extension of our natural creativity. We are born creative, every one of us. And technology over generations has been, the compounding accumulation of human creativity and nature's creativity. If we were to say like civilization is somehow bad and we need to destroy it or go back to the old days, sense of this duality of like human mind bad, nature before is good. Now, obviously, we're on this destructive, suicidal path, not only for ourselves, but for life on Earth in most of its forms. So we do urgently need to change. But I also just, again, want to bring the energy of celebration as to what we can do and this beauty that we are, like billions of human beings, all with their own stories and uniqueness and gifts. And if we are empowered to step into those gifts, then I think we can change the world.
I'm just going to jump in here to do a quick shout out to the sponsors of If I Ruled the World. Triodos Bank UK, an ethical, sustainable bank that I've been banking with for over 3 years now. I made the switch because I wanted to know that my money, so what money I do have, my hard-earned cash, doesn't end up being invested in all the wrong places like the arms industry and the fossil fuel industry, and basically industries and businesses that are literally killing people and planet. No, I wanted a bank that did good stuff, that uses money for positive change, with complete transparency by listing all the businesses that Triodos invests in on their website. Which is basically why I'm really happy to bank with Triodos, and even prouder and happier to have Triodos as the exclusive sponsors to If I Ruled the World. Now let's get back to it. Well, I guess this is sort of, we're heading that way, I can tell. So, I might as well just put yourself into that role. And I'm almost certain you're going to tell me that it's an uncomfortable proposition, because every single guest on the podcast to date, I believe, has said so.
Probably why it's a good concept.
Well, yeah, I know. It's like the people that step forward into leadership roles are probably the people we don't want in leadership roles, and the other way around. But anyway, that's another conversation. But you are ruler of the world. There's been a big global election. You've got the mandate. And there's sort of a set course of action you need to take, one of which is to begin right off from the start with a ban or elimination of something that you think just needs to go. What would that be?
Great. So I'm stepping into my power with compassion and question marks around, can we distribute it? But let's go. And I think first thing that came up to me was advertising. And, it's so insidious that we don't really notice it, that corporations pay manipulators using psychology to create desires in us with the perception that we're going to meet some core needs that we have as human beings, for belonging, for respect, for feeling enough and feeling beautiful. And they attach these beautiful yearnings and needs that we have with the goods and services that these corporations provide, and then give the illusion that these goods and services can meet those deep needs. Sometimes they can, sometimes that's beautiful, but often we are trapped in this constant cycle of consumption. We get the nice clothes, we get the nice house, and then we need to get the job promotion to keep this accumulation going, to be able to pay off the mortgage, to pay off the debt for the nice car. And probably most people listening will be aware of the kind of the damages of materialism. But I think that would be quite an easy one, just to just slow things down. I think this is the key aspect of what we need to. Like, where are we going? Like,
what's the rush?
What is the rush? Like, where are we actually going? And we don't have to have like we're going to be here by 2050, because like certainty of destination causes problems as well. It's like Stalin's little red book is like, okay, look, if we just do X, Y, and Z, we'll create a communist utopia. It's okay if we kill a few people to get there, because we're going to create a utopia. So that's problematic. But our capitalist system just assumes that growth in itself is going to just solve everything. And part of this growth system is advertising, to manufacture discontent, to manufacture the idea that we're not enough right now and we need to consume in order to fulfill that gap.
That's so crazy. That is what's interesting to me is that last night I watched Journey to the East just to refresh my memory, and you finish it with this beautiful sort of final piece to camera. You're out on, I think, a beach somewhere in the Southwest, and beautiful vistas, it's sunrise, there's hope. And you talk about whether or not we can grow out of this dark time, because I think you made that film during the pandemic and the lockdowns. And you say whether we can grow out of this dark time is up to us. And then the film ends and roll credits, and it's just beautiful. Music as well. It's just like, wow, I loved a lot of the tracks in that. But then immediately after, because of course I'm watching this on YouTube and I've cancelled my subscription recently, this ad comes in straight away with and it was a shower burst experience. And this person in the shower, God, it's like, I'll have some of that. But it was so mad. I was like, it's so funny that you picked advertising as the thing to ban, because to me, that was such a kind of, you couldn't have had a starker contrast. So I run a 19-person team now, and it's amazing. Feel so grateful, and I'm working every hour I can at the moment. And we run the biggest Tai Chi school in the world now with my Tai Chi master, Master Gu, and 50% of our students come from Facebook ads and YouTube ads. And so I profit, in terms of giving back to the mission, but I profit from advertising. If we could shut it down, let's go, because I do believe in its corrosive power. And I just wanted to speak to growth, because I use that word growth, and I still want to kind of speak to it. It's like degrowth is often what environmentalists talk about, and it kind of makes sense. Like, okay, we're already in a sustainability crisis. Can we just take back in developed countries some of that growth and actually use less so that there's more to go around? And I would argue that just the language of that is just not something that invites people in. Like, what do we want? Degrowth. When do we want it? Now. It's like, I don't think that really that's going to awaken a movement. It's not catchy.
So what about, no, it's like, let's have less of, the things that we enjoy. And, people are already struggling, millions of children in Britain, in the 6th richest country in the world, have to choose between heating and eating in the winter. It's like, it's a huge poverty and the distribution challenge. And so then middle class people in our middle class would, say let's degrowth, and, it's just really is insensitive. What I would love to bring in is real growth. So, we've done all this economic growth for so many decades, and, we're more anxious. And it's given us some nice stuff, but we're also destroying our ability to live on the planet. What about real growth? What about emotional growth? What about community growth? What about growth in our health and well-being and flourishing? Let's have real growth as something to really energize a movement, to demand and ask for real change from the powers that be, and to step into our power as communities.
I would get behind that. Definitely. So you've banned advertising. We're all a bit stunned, but it's happened. And we're having to get used to this new world where we're kind of like, well, where do I find happiness? Where do I find meaning? Where do I distract myself from the life Oh, let's not go there, Gillian. But policies, you got 3 policies. What would you do?
Education is what's really coming up for me. And, there's that core story of who we are and what we are a part of. And, it's funny, it's like freedom is really important to me, and to not just have the powers that be dictate how you think and how you are, and the ability to speak your truth so that we can evolve as a society, because we never get it right. We're always a work in progress, both as individuals and societies. And yet, if we want a society of freedom, we actually need to educate people the importance of freedom and the power of freedom. And so, ironically, maybe we need to indoctrinate people in the power of freedom, and not only freedom, but like, who are we? What are we capable of? And what we are a part of? We get all this training in algebra of how to rearrange quadratic equations, and maths is great. I think it's important to have that ability to work with numbers. And yet, do we talk about the great mystery that we are a part of, and to ground ourselves in the sacredness that we already are, and the awe and wonder that we can find from being in nature, and taking children out into nature and reconnecting, recognitizing recognition of, hey guys, this is what we're part of. We're part of this great, beautiful system. And hey, life can be challenging, and we're part of the city now, but it's important to remember as a society, and to create rituals around that remembrance of, not only, Christmas we could see as the metaphor of new birth and time for family and remembrance in the darkness, but then also, the remembrance of the great mother, if that's a word that works for you, the earth, Gaia, that supports us and nourishes us and creates us. And so, in a way that we co-create together as societies, but to really focus on that connection piece as a starting point, and as a foundation upon which we then create humans in this world, and to educate our young and our old and our middle.
So what I'm hearing is that you'd sort of flip the paradigm, because I think particularly with the sciences, so one of my big bugbears is, I don't know whether it's a trend over the last 20, 30 years, but there's a sense that we've figured a lot out. There's very little left to learn. We're kind of there. It's clearly not true, but I'll give you a couple examples. One of our earliest guests was talking about how there's still plant species that are yet to be discovered. And when this was being fact-checked, that was one of the things that was flagged up was, is that true? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. There are probably species like right outside that, for all sorts of reasons, haven't been described, haven't been scientifically described. There's still a lot to learn. And that really resonates with me. So what I'm hearing is your policy would be about, rather than educating about all the things we know and can clearly define, it would be inviting the mystery, inviting the things we don't know, being comfortable with the fact that when you go to the fringes and the edges of science, that's where it gets interesting. That's where it gets exciting. I love that.
Yeah, beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah, I think such an important point. And, it's funny with the Daoist, they are confident in their thinking that the mystery is important. So,
wow.
it's, so the opening lines of the Tao Te Ching, which is the foundational text of Taoism, is the Tao, so the way of nature, the Tao is both named and nameless. Named, it is the mother of all the things that we see in the world. But nameless, it is the origin of all. With desires, we can see the stuff of the world, the separations, the distinctions, but it's only when we're desireless that we can see the mystery itself. And to see the mystery is the doorway to deep, real understanding.
It's just occurred to me, language in this exploration, in this discovery, must be a huge barrier. Like, how have you navigated that?
Yeah, and I think it's such an important question relating to science, because it's like, science is beautiful, so important. You got a question about how the world works, gather some evidence, see if the evidence matches the question. Really important. It's like the falsifiability, we can be wrong, and we collect evidence to show that. But there's this false narrative that science and the mystery, or science and spirituality, is somehow in opposition. because there is always we can take our questions, like any child, and your children probably did it. It's like, why is the sky blue? Like, okay, because of the refraction of the light. It's like, well, why do the atoms do that? Well, because of electromagnetic forces. Okay, why does electromagnetic forces exist? Like, I don't know, shut up. So like, I don't know, shut up. We eventually ask any question and you get there eventually. So, so there is the mystery underlying, embracing within, like, whatever direction you want, all of it. Yeah. And then there's the hubris of the scientist to say, yeah, we've actually almost found everything out. We've almost got this unified theory of the universe where we can get everything into one equation. Okay, well, actually, how is it that the universe can work according to these rules and laws of mathematics that can be determined? Well, that's a great mystery. And it's not just like those laws of mathematics existed before the Big Bang or before even the potential of the Big Bang. It's like, where did that potentiality come from? What, they're just like mathematical laws existed before everything. So what existed before the mathematical laws? You can't work it out with logic. It is a great mystery.
I mean, most scientists that I speak to and interview, like when we're in those in-between takes moment, I think that certainty is built up from a system where grant applications have to go through, that some of the evidence supports policy, supports decision-making in business or whatever, right? So that need to be certain of your work and certain of your findings based on good sound evidence-based science, there's a huge weight. But as soon as cameras are not running and stuff, I can assure you most people I speak to are like, yeah, it's pretty wild. We still don't know so much, And so I do think this public face of science, which is, yes, well, we've got our measuring stick and it's all great, It's not really, it's not where it's at.
And just quickly on that, like, I think that is part of the fake news world and the distrust of science is because they haven't been real with us. It's like, actually, I'm part of the spiritual communities in the UK, and like, I'm surprised. Yeah, there's not too many, but there are climate skeptics, and just the kind of the ignoring of what science tells us. Like in America, we've got a presidential candidate who believes that climate change. Like, what did he say recently with Elon Musk, that there'll be a quarter inch of sea rise in the next 200 years or something, just like totally made up, and yet he can get away with it and still have millions of people support him. And so I think that science is so important and science is so beautiful and has helped us understand so much. And it can't explain everything. And there are great mysteries and value judgments of like right or wrong and goodness and intuition. And like not just relying on language, actually through meditation, coming into presence, attunement with the mystery, which I could explain more, is something that cannot be done with words. And so there's so many important realms to life that science cannot help us with, or at least cannot fully explain. It can help us, but cannot fully explain. And so I really do, and I see in my work, I hope that people can see my love of science. And yet also, I believe I'm this new generation, as you are, of saying, let's be humble with this and actually not claim to have everything certain, and then change the systems that create those incentives where scientists have to claim certainty when actually they don't have it.
100%. 100%. So how many policies? Are we still on policy number 1? It's a big job.
It's a big job. It's a big one.
Okay. Policy number 2. I mean, we could stay with that all day probably.
Yeah,
let's move to the second.
It's a big one. Yeah.
The second thing you're going to do.
Next one coming into me is what gets measured gets managed, which is a very funny thing to come after what we just talked about. But yeah, so like what we pay attention to, our energy goes towards that. So like in our societies, we measure GDP as the kind of the sleight of hand or the way of capturing the success of a country. We've grown economically, therefore we're a strong country and we're doing well. And we're on this destructive path, as we've already discussed, because of this obsession with economic growth as being the end all and be all getting all these phrases right today.
We're with you, the be all and end all, but yes.
Yeah, there we go.
That's the least important thing you've got to say.
Yeah, exactly. Of what success looks like. What does flourishing look like? And what is, this idea of, as we said earlier, where are we arriving to? And like what should we work towards? Because what we measure filters out to all of these systems. Like what is important? And just before we, how can we change it on a collective level, bringing it onto the individual? Because again, like this, every time we can talk about our collective healing, there's reflections with our personal healing. Most of our viewers and listeners won't think that the bank balance and the salary is the main metric of their growth. Obviously, we need a minimum amount to cover our costs. But then beyond that, I guess most of us aren't seeing that as like, oh, I'm earning £150,000 and therefore I'm a better person. There might be some of that, but there's probably some deeper meaning, deeper options for us. But yeah, what I'd invite as individuals is a way of reconfiguring of like, why am I here and what's important is service, contribution, and the dance between being and doing. So can I celebrate my being without needing to do anything? And to really give myself the gift of my own presence, to enjoy this great gift of life. And then if I want to do, then to do and to show up in the world with an energy of service. For me, that's what works for me, is like what energizes me as an individual. Bringing it onto the collective is then, okay, so what are the dimensions of life that are really important? Emotional, relational, natural, spiritual, and to economic is important as well. And Donut Economics is another great book I recommend people to read around what does flourishing look like for a society. And I say, yeah, that measurement, I'd just, if I'm not going to report GDP, it's not going to include arms, it's not going to include fixing oil leakages, and it's not going to include, like a lot of just, if we have an oil spill, then we have to pay money to clear it up. GDP goes up. Madness. So, and then that's our idea of what success looks like. Before we had this pristine nature, there's no monetary economy. Suddenly there's an oil spill. We have to employ loads of people to go and fix it. Suddenly GDP goes up. Complete madness. So yeah, changing those metrics, I think, is really important.
Wow. So you would, I'm trying to imagine what it is. And I know that Bhutan is one of the few countries that doesn't measure success by GDP. I don't know if this is one of those urban legends or if it's true.
I think it's true, yeah.
I know they call it gross domestic happiness. Would you adopt that and just say, let's just do what Bhutan does? Or would you fashion that into something that, suits you better because you're the leader of the world?
Great. Yeah.
And you can.
The international agreement. I think this is one thing that has led to the success of GDP, is that it is just an easy, it's like money, dollar value. We all agree money's important. And so then let's measure our relative success against each other as countries by using this money metric. Mm-hmm. Whereas it's like, okay, do we just look at happiness? Do we look at, health? Do we look at the amount of housing, the amount of poverty? There's so many variables that we can put into it. I think I've already kind of freestyled a little bit about what I could bring into mind, but it's the economics important, and then it's the emotional, the relational. Maybe let's bring the spiritual into the emotional, just to keep the conservatives happy. It has to kind of be acceptable to, even though I've got infinite power, I think I still want to meet people where they are and as much as I can. So, yeah. I'll come back to you at my next board meeting with the clarity of what those numbers would be. But yeah, an integrative, holistic approach.
And okay, and I love the fact that you've recognized that there must be some kind of, is it consensus building? I don't know, but an international agreement on measuring what is actually important, or deciding what is important to measure, in fact, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, third policy.
I'd say then the money system. I think, classic phrase is, we are incentivized to buy things we don't actually want, to impress people we don't actually like, with money that we don't actually have. And that's capitalism, baby. And that's the world that we've created. And I'm not an anti-capitalist in the sense that I think there's beauty to corporations or organizations doing their thing, and they can make goods and services to serve people and planet. I think that's definitely possible. But yeah, it's just the capitalist system that dominates every aspect of society that's the problem. One of the key problems is that we create fiat money. So our central governments, they can borrow money by just printing it. So they create artificial demand within our economies. So we borrow off tomorrow in order to pay for today. COVID, obviously important interventions were done, but also we borrowed billions and billions and billions off the future generations through creating this made-up money through quantitative easing. We're not only borrowing from future generations, we've got to pay it back through austerity, or we go bankrupt and just, it's kind of made up anyway. That's another option. We're also borrowing from tomorrow, where we kind of say, well, tomorrow's natural resources. So, we can invest in even more infrastructure and Amazon factories because, I've got this cheap bank loan, and that comes from the central bank creating quantitative easing. So they've got all this cheap money flooding into the economy, which then creates more stuff, more concrete being built, more factories being built, more carbon emissions being released because of all this money being created. Now, obviously, we're already in this process of runaway climate breakdown, where we could live in a jungle planet and reach tipping points within the next 200 years, and serious challenges already on our doorstep. And that is financed through our economic system borrowing off tomorrow. And it's already having huge challenges today, let alone our future generations trying to work it all out. This myth of progress and the idea that we can just sacrifice today because tomorrow's technology will sort everything out. So if that were to happen, we'd have to just go quits on all of our debts and just start again, which actually probably would redistribute quite a lot of money, because a lot of developing countries owe a lot of money to pensioners in rich countries or the IMF. So we'd need to start again. And then we could then say, okay, well, actually, we can't just make up money. We've got to make it attached to the number of trees, the number of fields. And so then as we associate our money with something real, which is, the flourishing of our biosphere, then there's an incentive for the money system to not just borrow off tomorrow and just pretend that destruction isn't happening, but instead to make money from helping nature and people flourish today.
Wow, that's a first. Sort of just eliminate debt, start, just almost like hit the reset button. And the mention of IMF, that's a first. And that's a huge one, actually. I'm not going to, unless you want to, I'm not going to ask you to get into that, because that's like a massive area. And I'm still looking for the person to speak on the role of the IMF and the World Bank in the way that our world has been set up. That's a huge topic.
Yeah.
These are fantastic. And all from someone who kind of saw some guy do some high kicks on the internet.
Yeah, I studied economics at uni, and I'm passionate about the system change aspect. It's like, what good is me meditating on a mountain somewhere if so much beauty is being destroyed through these suicidal economic systems? And there is no separation between my wellness and the wellness of the world. And that doesn't mean I have to take the burden of the whole world onto my shoulders, because it's not just held by small George. I'm an aspect of the whole. It's not my responsibility, but I can contribute. And I'm really, that personal and planetary transformation, the intersection between the two, not only in my films and teaching can, I've had the great privilege of learning all these ancient teachings, and if they still resonate today, it's because probably they're speaking to something fundamental. And so not only can these teachings transform our lives, but also they create a fundamental understanding, the systemic understanding of that we are in an interconnected system, aspects of the whole, And with that understanding, how does that transform the economic and political systems that shape the world fundamentally? So I'm really passionate about that.
Wow. George, honestly, like, okay, that the authenticity and the way you've just said that is unmistakable. But also, like, how did I not know that you studied economics at university? Like, you are actually very well suited to be talking about this. Like, you kept that quiet, did you? It's not something you talk a lot about.
Yeah, I don't really talk about it. And, I also run a business, I run an organization with 19 people. And yeah, I'm passionate about taking action grounded in my spirituality or connection. And how does that change how I show up in the world? And how does that change how we show up in the world? So I think it's super important.
Honestly, every episode is a penny drop moment. That one has for me, because for me, this is like system change in action. Like, you have somehow managed to bring very pragmatic, practical experience, knowledge and practice to something that's mystical and philosophical and spiritual and all those things all wrapped up into one. Like, that is almost the system changing, embodied in what you do and how you're doing it. And I know there's the hero worship. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying it is really fascinating. And it's a model that, maybe someone out there might go, hey, maybe this is possible. So you have two more things to do. You've got to appoint or nominate, I should say, a successor, because we're trying to be democratic, even though they rule the world. And then once you've done that, it's where do you retire to? Like, what would be your happy place? Where would you be like, that's it, my work is done, I can chill now?
Yeah, who would I give it over to? See, I don't have a lot of clarity over, like, I think this is what we're yearning for. And like, I honor Keir as, I think he's a man of integrity in his own way, and like feels in more integrity. I'm talking, for UK audiences, with the Labour Party of, like the Conservatives has been so deeply chaotic and immoral and lying. And it's good to kind of have hopefully a bit more integrity in positions of power, but also Keir is part of the economic growth paradigm, and there's so much more that, like, social media seems to celebrate these people who are authentic, where, they don't care about what other people say. And then so that just seems to incentivize liars who are so brash that they don't really care about what anyone says. And then people that do have integrity that, try and compromise, they then don't get shared on social media, and then they don't have the influence. Also, maybe they're just a bit boring. It's like, if I'm real, like, I'm trying to think of people that I'm like, politicians that I'm like, yeah, I'd love you to take over and to lead. And I do think there's a real yearning, and there's a real calling from life itself for leaders to step into. It's like actually pretty simple. We have great potential. We can work together. We're not angels. We do also need security, but we can do so much better. And we got to sort out the sustainability crisis and this distribution crisis. And let's do so not from a place of lack, but from a place of, we can do this and we can distribute, not because we're saying you can't have that, but because we want to have everyone having a life that is nourishing. Mm-hmm. And I don't see people, really saying that message. And so, if any listeners want to step into that role of power, I give it to ye. So
you issue the job description.
I issue a job description and a calling for us to step into our power. And as Martin Luther King says, power is the ability to enact change. And, we are born in unequal systems, and some people with different genders and different skin colors in different countries will have varying amount of power. But let's not give up our power. It's like I'm a victim to life. It's like we all have power to move from where we are. And okay, some people have more ability to enact change than others. But if all of us step into our power, then I really do trust that change is possible. So there's the job description. I welcome your applications.
The floor is open. That's an interesting way of doing it. And it like calling forward the kind of person that doesn't see themselves as a natural leader. And maybe, boring. I love that.
Yeah.
We don't need more more personalities, let's just say, for want of a better word.
Yes.
And then finally, like, where would you retire to? Where would you go?
The Cairngorms in Scotland is one of my spiritual homes. It's where I recorded my upcoming film, The Subtle Art of Losing Yourself. And the mountains and the forests and the lochs, the trees, the Scots pine with their radiant orange shimmering bark on a sunset, I think would hold me as I retire and then eventually leave this form, this story that we call George, to reconnect with the whole.
Wow. So talk to me about your new film.
Yeah, so it's called The Subtle Art of Losing Yourself, and it's recorded in the Cairngorms, and we go and see the intelligence of the animals living there. And we ask the question, well, if they're intelligent, what does that say about our intelligence and where we come from and what we are a part of? And through that questioning, we explore science and anthropology, where do we come from, and using observation to learn about who we are through our own experience and our own intuition, we come to an awe-inspiring understanding of who we are. And then with that understanding, we ask the question, well, how does that change how we show up in the world? And so this is my contribution to the great collective mission that we're on as a species, to live in balance, hopefully this century. Balance is possible. And it's my contribution to offer some ideas and some practices, and then also community through the free online course that is offered from the film as well, is that we can do it together. And so I can invite people. The film's called The Subtle Art of Losing Yourself, losingyourself.org. We have screenings October 19th in London and in Bristol, November 2nd. There's online screenings, and there will be community screenings as well. And if you can't watch it, then join the mailing list, because you'll get access to the recordings and the eventual film as well. Thank
you so much, George. You've built an amazing community. I've watched your growth over the last sort of 6-7 years now. All power to you. I'm really loving watching your journey. So thank you so much for agreeing to do the podcast.
Thank you so much, Gillian, for your presence, and so grateful for this conversation, and sending my best vibes to all of our beautiful viewers and listeners.
I gotta say, I just loved that conversation. I hope you did too. I love to try and crunch down and pick out the gems, the takeaways, as I call them. And frankly, this conversation, they're just too many to go through. So I'm just gonna settle on one. I'm going to single out one that I really loved, and the one that I am calling the code. So there's this code in this conversation. It crops up a few times, and I'm guessing that this code was cracked many times down the ages, down the millennia, by religions and philosophies and spiritual practices and educational institutions and even the military. And that said, this code isn't always put to the right task, but I guess, do you know what? If it gets used and reused and it's persisted all these thousands of years, it suggests that it works. And the way that George frames it is with such clarity that I think it makes it very, very useful in this age of change. And the code goes like this: 3 things: insight, practice, and community. And if you can get all that right, you might just have the foundation for resilience in activism, resilience in the face of overwhelming challenge, resilience in the face of change. I'd love to know what your takeaways are. You can get in touch via Instagram. You can find me in the comments. My Instagram handle is Gillian's_voice. You can email the show on podcast@gillianburkevoice.com. And of course, please like, share, subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. It really helps grow the podcast, grow this community. But most of all, what I'd really appreciate is that if you could just tell one person about this podcast, about this episode, someone you think will really get it, really get something out of these conversations, I'd be so grateful. So, while we wait for George's new film, The Subtle Art of Losing Yourself, to drop, which is going to happen next month, I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite quotes from one of his earlier films, Journey to the East, and it goes like this. Every single one of us is this crazy miracle of nature. We are all pretty remarkable, and every day in a city you're walking past all these people and you don't see their magic because it would just be overwhelming. But when you're in nature and there's more space and you have the trees, and if you're lucky, every so often you run into a non-human consciousness, you'll get that feeling that this is intelligent and I don't feel that different from it. So that is courtesy of George Thompson. And while you let those words soak in and those thoughts gather with this beautiful natural soundscape, take a moment and take a breath and ask yourself, if you rule the world, what would you do? Thanks for listening.